For this specific session, some of the purposes are to remind us of some of the policies, some of the things, not only what they are, like that they're written down on a paper, but the why behind why we do these things. And so to help us think about this a little bit, I heard this at a conference and it stuck with me, and so I want to talk about it tonight. It was stated that there are really two kinds of people in this world. There are rule followers and there are rule breakers, right? So, as a show of hands, just to get to know each other a little bit, how many of you would say, oh yeah, I'm for sure type A rule follower? Like if there's a rule out there, I'm going to follow it. If there's not a rule, I'm going to make a rule, or I'm going to go find one somewhere because I feel like I need these rules to follow. No, okay? You also notice, by the way, the non-rule followers, how quick some of these people are to identify themselves. Oh, you're asking me to raise my hand? Like, of course, yes, like me, right? Yeah, that's me, right? All right, and then the flip side is the rule breakers. A little slower to get up, a little like, casual, okay? All right, and if you don't know, go ahead and find one of those rule followers, and they'll be able to tell you if you are a rule follower or not, right? So the reason I point this out is because when it comes to things that are sometimes a little boring, frankly, a little mundane, a little of course this is the case, such as rules and policies and procedures. It helps me at least to identify that some people, it's on a paper, it's been stated once, I'm good to go, right? Like this is the way things are supposed to be, I'm good, right? And I go with that. There's other people that reason a little bit, right? And they're like, well, what purpose does this have? What's the goal of this? What's the intention of this? Once I know that, once I know where it's going or the spirit behind this, it will help guide me in this way, right? And I point this out because in some ways, how we're wired in personality, it's not as if one is superior than the other, contrary to the rule follower people out there, right? And I say that because there are probably people who tend towards the rule follower side that honestly aren't super compassionate or aren't understanding of somebody's situation or aren't understanding of the context in which you find yourself. And so just having this rule on a paper, okay, concrete, black and white, well, we have to make decisions and we have wisdom calls and we have things that are there. And so there are things that the rule breaker, and I put that sort of in a pejorative way on purpose, but wanting to understand reason, wanting to understand context, and so you can move towards somebody in love and care, understanding that. And so hopefully tonight we can have a little bit of both, okay? That's my goal, is for the rule followers out there or the rule breakers, there's enough explanation and understanding of why these things are important as we go to serve and care for young people. Okay, you have note cards. Here's what I would like for you, okay? I'm going to hopefully serve you by walking through some of these things and explaining why. Here's how you can serve me, okay? I'm one person, okay? I talk with some of our directors and some of our leaders. Some people make comments to me, and that's helpful, and give feedback, but not everybody does. So some things you don't find out till 6 months or longer down the road of how things are or how things should be or wish you'd be and all that. And so here's what I would like. As we go through and talk, you have that note card. It is your note card. You can put your name on it, or you can leave it anonymous. But what I would appreciate as we talk is if there is a question you have about a specific policy, maybe an explanation or a reasoning behind the policy, or maybe it's something that sparks an idea or a thought that you have of how we could better serve our children or teens, please put that on the note card, okay? Again, you can keep it anonymous, or you can put your name if you want me to track you down and you want to have a conversation, that's fine too. But that would be a way of serving me and especially some of our ministry leaders, because you all are the one who are with kids and teens. You are the ends of the fingers and the toes, okay, who are mingling with them. And so I would appreciate comments or questions that you have. And for the Ben Dovers out there, I can easily toss the note cards, okay? You know who you are, who put the crazy things on the cards. So that's a way that you can serve me and you can help me, and so I would appreciate that. All right. Before we get into the policy itself, I did want to highlight two ministries and specifically some of the direction and changes that are there. And then we'll jump into it. So the first one is the Awana ministry. So as you know, I think by now, Jeff and Shannon Darling are not with us. They're all the way in eastern North Carolina, about an hour from my parents. And they had a pivotal role, not only in Awana, but junior church and many other ministries. But as they're transitioning out, we are, I guess you'd say, retooling a little bit, rethinking Awana based on our context, how we can serve our children and our community well. And so Dustin and I have been meeting for a few weeks now, several meetings, some of them pretty long ones, like walking through, digesting, trying to have a good sense of how we can use this tool to serve our children and families. And so I'm very excited about some of the developments and things that we've talked about, and I think some of the feedback from the workers that he's gotten is excitement as well for the direction that's headed and where we want to take it. So that's the first announcement. That Dustin will be directing that ministry. We're going to keep talking, and I'm sure he's going to come down across the hall and be like, what's this? Let's talk about this a little bit, which is great. So we're gonna help each other in that, and so I'm excited about some of those changes. And if you're not an Awana worker but you want to find out some of that direction, as a parent, you'll find out soon. Otherwise, you can talk to him or talk to myself. The other area that I want to highlight is our youth ministry, our teen ministry, and so I'm taking over the leadership of that. And so the youth staff and I have been meeting now for, I don't know, Ben, how long has it been? A few weeks, at least, several weeks, trying to, again, like Awana, sort of rethink this ministry. How can we serve our teens? How can we serve our families in that way? And so parents of teens, we're going to be sending out some info here soon about some things we're going to continue and kind of keep the direction as we have, some things that are new or a little bit different, especially on Wednesday nights. And so look for some more info on that. And again, if you're not a parent of a teen, but you want to find out more about what's going on, I'd love to talk to you about those things. So just wanted to highlight both of those ministries and some of the changes that we're looking to implement. Okay, hopefully you have the policy either in front of you or on your phone. And so I want to start out tonight, and probably a good chunk of the time, really the first couple of pages, which are our vision, mission, and values. And we put these at the very front of our policy statement, not just because you're supposed to do that when you write documents like this, but because we want it to actually guide our ministries. And so you'll notice on the vision statement, we've revised these a little bit. So it says here, the vision that young people would follow Jesus for life. Okay? So maybe a way to think about this, and we're going to try to emphasize this a lot through this year in different ways, whether it's with Awana or the teens or other ministries, is that what is the long-term goal? What is the trajectory for, let's say, an infant starting out in nursery here at church, here regularly, by the time they hit 3rd grade and then 6th grade and then 9th grade, and then the senior, as they're heading off beyond this stage of child and teen ministry, what is it that we desire, by God's grace, that He will work in their life? And so that's really what that vision statement is, that young people who would follow Jesus, not just in a preschool setting or just in the teen group or in these settings, but it would actually be for life. So if that's where we're aiming there, how can we take our current ministries to young people, and how can we aim in that direction? So that's what the vision is all about. And so the mission statement kind of unpacks that a little bit. So the children and teen ministries of our church exist to help young people belong, grow, and serve as followers of Jesus at home, church, and the community. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly unpack these. So the belong idea here is that as they're here, we want it to be a welcoming place. We want it to be a caring place. And this would include children of families that are here all the time in a church and those who come outside for various ministries, that there's a sense in which they care for us here, that they want us to be here. But the belong goes beyond just, my Awana leader's really nice, or they treat my child well in the nursery. It's actually going the step of saying, not only do we want you to belong in the sense we want you here, but we want you to belong to the same family that we're a part of, which is the family of Christ. And so that belong carries with it the idea that you are following Jesus and that you're part of His family, just like we are. And so the belong is the first step, and that leads to the grow. So the grow is probably the easiest one to visualize. So that's teaching, that's instructing, that's calling them to understand things and to believe them and to follow Jesus, not just initially when they come to Christ, but really for the rest of their life. And then finally, the serve part. And this will look different in different ministries. As the older a child, or especially a teen, gets, We want them to realize that the family of God, belonging to a family of God, belonging to a church, is not just about intake. Okay? It's not just you fill my tank in this way, but it's actually as God changes your life, you desire to serve. You want to serve others. And so talking about what does it look like for a fifth grader or a ninth grader or a senior to use their gifts and serve, to realize this church or this family is my family, it's my church. So how can we encourage them to serve? And so, as it says here, to serve God and others, not just to be consumed with themselves. Okay? And this message, especially about service, is very countercultural. Okay? Unless you've had your head in the sand when it comes to children and teens these days, so much of the message is it's all about you. Life is about you. It's centered on you. How can we make you happy? How can we cater everything to be around you? And so part of our role in helping them to grow, to be long-term followers of Jesus, is to realize it's not ultimately about you. It's how you can use yourself and what God's given to serve others. And so our goal in these ministries is to help them belong, grow, and serve. And you notice that there's 3 areas or arenas for that to happen. So as followers of Jesus, so you could think disciples here, disciples of Jesus at home, so as a child, as a sibling, as a grandchild, in the church, so that's while they're here, that's while they're with the body of Christ, and then finally in the community. Because the reality is, even if a child is here Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, that's still a very small slice of their life. Okay, the rest is spent with you or in their homes, but it's also at school, it's on sports teams, and as they grow, it's at their jobs, it's when they're going to college, and they're going off in life. And so how can we, if the goal, remember, is long-term followers of Jesus, how can we help them to realize, here's what a follower of Christ looks like in your home, okay? When your brother steals your Lego piece and you're mad and you want to smack him, right? That is discipleship 101, right? How do you handle your emotions? Or when you're on that sports team and you're getting made fun of because you don't follow what they do, or you don't use the words that they use, or whatever that means. And so how can we help them in all of the arenas of life to be a follower of Jesus? And so that's how we've kind of unpacked these the mission statement in that way. And so that leads to, number 3, the objectives. And so how can we, by God's grace, help them to belong to this family of Christ, to grow and to serve in the arenas God's put them? And so that leads to 4 E's that I have on here. So the first is, we desire to engage those who are not followers of Christ. And so if somebody were to say, why do we do something like a VBS or a fall festival? Or why do we invite people in the community to Awana who are outside of a church context? Well, we can say, well, part of our goal, we're going to get to Romans, this verse hopefully in a week or two on Sunday morning, in Romans 10, 14, 15, how can they believe if they have not heard, right? They need to hear the truth of the gospel. And so the engaged part of it is there are people, young people, who are not following Christ. And so how can we connect with them? How can we engage with them? And by the way, this does include children who come all the time, but especially thinking connection with those who are outside. So that's engage. The second is to evangelize, to share the person and the work and the hope of Jesus. And so again, hopefully all of our ministries have an aspect or a component of evangelism, because we don't know where a young person is. We don't know where a teenager is in their walk with Christ, in their journey through life. If your story is like mine, as far as growing up in a church context, my being evangelized happened from the time I was incredibly young, before I could really probably even think or process, to the point of lots of struggles through my preteen and teen years. And so it was constant evangelism. It was constant sharing of Christ and calling me to follow Christ. And so evangelism needs to be a big part. And then the third is to establish followers of Jesus in the truth and the power of the Spirit. And so this would be helping them to sink deep roots into what it means to be a follower of Christ, the authority of Scripture. What does it mean to stand firm on our faith when others mock us, or when others provide alternatives to the faith, to following Christ? And so the more that we can establish them, especially when they're younger, in the truth of the gospel and in the power of God's work in their life, the greater, from a human perspective, the greater the opportunity for them to follow Jesus for the rest of their life. And then finally, the equip part. equipping followers of Jesus to mature and to serve. And so this would be providing tools, providing opportunities, again, for them to live out their faith, for them to serve and use their gifts to tell others about Jesus. And so as they grow older, there's more opportunities to equip them because of their capacity and ability in that way. And so as we've worked through, especially the two ministries, both of youth ministry and Awana, tried to use some of these principles as a grid. So if we ask ourselves a simple program question, should we do this program? Should we do it this way? How long should it be? How many workers do we need? Who do we invite? How do we invite people? How do we promote, right? All of these questions that come to running a program, we want to, by God's grace, be able to make it fit or flow out of these things. So if it's not helping us to engage those who don't follow Jesus, to evangelize them, to establish them, to equip and call them to service, then we should ask some questions, right? Like, is this essential? Is this necessary? Does it serve the mission that we're trying to accomplish? And so we're kind of laying this out as a vision in a leadership level, but where you can come along is to try to understand and to try to fit that in. And as I said on the note cards, asking questions, giving us feedback of, I think this is what it's stated to be or do, but I'm not sure how we're doing that, or I'm not sure what my role is in making this happen. And so that's a way that you can help service in this way, living out these objectives. All right, and then number 4 is the values. I'm not going to walk through all of these. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them on there, but starting on page 1. Gospel-centered, we've talked about a little bit with evangelism. Dependence on the Spirit, that God must work and change people's lives. The 4th one, I do want to comment briefly on the parent-allied, and that's because a big part of a child knowing God and being discipled to walk with Jesus is their home. It is their parents in that way. And so especially a child who's in a home of parents who understand the gospel and love Jesus, what we can do is encourage that. So how can we foster what needs to happen in a home in that way? And then as it says here, there are many who do not have a spiritual family, meaning one or both of their parents or the greater part of the family don't know Christ. And so how can we, by God's grace, step in and be that spiritual family that they don't have? And then the last one I want to point out is joyful care. It says here, young people need to know that we care for them as individuals who are made in God's image, to show love and proper care for them. And so this leads into the policies that we're going to talk about and highlight a few of them. But I think it is important to remember that we can have a very safe environment. We can have a protective environment. We can have a fun place to be where kids and teens say, I go there because it's fun, and people care about me, and it's great. And that's a good thing. That's something that we ought to aim for. But if all that they see in us is we take care of the kids, they get some babysitting, they're going to be safe, it's going to be okay, but they don't see in us a joy for God and for the child and a love for them that's rooted in God, then essentially we can be very similar to a civic development program, right? But there's a lot of alternatives for watching a child, providing an environment, keeping them safe, giving them some life skills. So what is different, or what marks us out as being different? And I think a joyful care and love for them is one of the things that can mark us out. Okay, so that leads us into the policy itself. If you flip over to page 3, or pull it up on your phone, there are some general expectations that kind of underline the rest of the policies, so I want to highlight a couple of them. It says here, love the children and teens like Christ does, putting their needs before your own. And that seems like a very basic statement, and like, yeah, a policy should have something like that if you're going to care for kids. But it's good to remind ourselves that when we serve, we're not here for ourselves, okay? You say, yep, I get that, Pastor Tim. So what that means, okay, is that if most of my time, or if a chunk of my time when I'm supposed to be doing X is spent on one of these, or talking to another peer, worker, friend, or parent off in a corner or off somewhere, and we're neglecting the care of the children and teens, then on some level we're putting our desires or our needs before the children, right? Or if we are out of convenience, or because we're not sure what to say or do, we're missing opportunities or windows to speak truth into their lives, then again, we're not putting their needs in front of ours. We're just taking the easy way out. And so to consider or just come back to, we're here to serve them, that we are here by God's grace to show God's love to them. So putting their needs before our own. And so another one I want to highlight, it's number 4 on here, is to be on time for events and prepared for ministry obligations. And so I was talking to Tammy, I think she's out there, about some of the things on nursery side. And she said, probably one of the biggest things is just make sure you're here early. Make sure you're here 10 minutes before. And as a parent who has had children in nursery now for, well, I guess Nora's actually out of it. So it's the first time in 10 plus years we haven't had a kid technically in a nursery program. But as somebody who has had that, I can tell you that a worker showing up 10 minutes before, ready to receive and ready to go, especially somebody who's serving in other ministries and other areas, it's a huge help and blessing, okay? And if we could go to the flip side of that, there are times where it is frustrating and it takes away ministry opportunities from some parents to serve in a ministry, to talk to people, to engage in that way, if you're not there on time, you're not there ready to serve. And so that's important on nursery and those programs. I'd say also when it comes to Awana or it comes to other ministries, if you are running in last minute, you're kind of huffing and puffing, oh, I got to go to copies, I got to do this, I got to do that. I realize life happens, trust me, life happens a lot around our house. So I'm not trying to be harsh in this way, but sometimes I think we miss some opportunities where that parent just dropped that kid off. That parent does not want to come into our church building. But if you go out there and you can talk to them and engage with them, you might have a gospel conversation. Or by, again, running around because you're not ready or not prepared, you're missing that 3-minute window to talk to that kid. You might be the most loving and caring person that kid talks to all week. And yet, if we're not ready to receive or prepared, we can miss an opportunity to serve them. And so, okay, rule follower, rule breaker. Rule followers are like, yeah, amen. I'm going to be there 10 minutes before you said, right? Rule breakers are like, well, I mean, the spirit of it is XYZ, right? And so again, the why behind the policy and what we're asking is, it actually is there for a reason. It's there for the protection of kids and safety. It's also there to serve those families and to give you opportunities. And so that's one that I just remind you of. If you have questions on that, what the expectations are for your ministries, please talk to everyone that is there. All right. Skipping ahead now, we're going to go to arrival departure time. I think I pretty much covered that. That's on page 5. By default, okay, if you're not sure, by default, you should be in your place, ready to go at 10 minutes prior to the start of a service or an event. Okay? Again, there's exceptions. Some ministries you need to be there earlier, but at minimum 10 minutes ready to go in your place, again, so that you can serve others in this way. That is, again, a great way of serving them. Under this, it's kind of 2 and 3 under here, would be the transfer of care. And so this is, again, it's an area that can get a little bit sloppy, it can get a little bit rough, but making sure that if you're in a child care slot in which you need to receive them and then care needs to give them back to the parent, that you're following the procedures that are there. And so if it's infants, the beeper or pager that's there. If it's older children, the card that is there. And so by enforcing that, again, we're not being harsh. By following this rule, we're actually showing care for the child and for the family that's there. And so if you have questions, again, you can talk to Tammy about some of those details. You can write it down on the card if there's any specifics that you have, but that's a way of serving everyone. And then on page 6, under protecting kids and teens while they're in our care, a few just basic things, again, reminders here is starting off with the 2-adult rule. And so it says here, in general, there should always be 2 adult leaders present in the classroom during those times. And so it says in general because there might be exceptions or times where you got to rush out to help a kid out in the hallway or something that comes up, there's a nosebleed, you got to go grab a tissue or Kleenex or first aid kit or something that's there. But as you're serving, during that time, if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes into it, and you don't have that other helper that's supposed to be there, that's not good, right? That's not the ideal that you're serving by yourself. And so you should have that second adult that is present and helping you in that way. And if you're not getting that help or you need some more helpers or people for that, please talk to a ministry director on that. All right. And then under visibility, number 3, one advantage we have of a very small building is it should be easy to be visible at all times, okay? And in fact, if anything, it's difficult to not be visible in our building. But something to keep in mind or to consider, that you ought to be seen from a door or from an exterior looking in and not obstructed. And that's for the child's protection. It's also for yours as well, so that you can be above board in that way. Under discipline number 4, I'm not going to walk through this one by detail. This is a section that I updated though, hopefully to be a little bit more clear. I walked through using a few different resources to kind of talk through or explain what does correction look like, what does redirecting if a child needs help in that way, how do you follow up with somebody in that way. And so pages 6 through 8 walk through some helpful things. And so I'd say this is a great resource, like go to it if you're having trouble or you're needing some help maybe in walking through what does it mean to have appropriate help in that way. All right, let's skip to page number 11, I think. I redid the page numbers, but I think it's page 11, under Restroom Procedures. Again, because we have one set of bathrooms, I think it's pretty straightforward in our building. Been in many other churches in which it's a lot more complicated. But it says here, children may use the nursery room. You need to confirm that with the workers. So this is the younger children who would be using that, as it says here, up through kindergarten with the help of the nursery worker. But then everyone else, so above kindergarten, it says here up through elementary, it says a leader should accompany them into the hallway restroom and wait outside the door or the seating area near the sinks on both sides for younger children. Do not be alone in the restroom with the child unless there is an emergency. So, and again, this should be pretty straightforward, but accompanying them there where they need to be, propping the door if you need to, checking in that way. But otherwise, you should not be alone with them in that kind of setting. All right, I have 2 more that I wanted to walk through. Under, again, my page numbers are off here. I think it's number 10. So security and emergency responses. Under number 10A, on injuries. So we have first aid kits. There's one in the kitchen, the first cabinet as you open it up. There's animal crackers and goldfish, and there's a first aid kit that is in there. There's also one in the nursery room as well, I believe in one of the bottom cabinets. And so if you need that, Band-Aids are the common one, but there's some other basic things you need there. Obviously, if it's an emergency, you or another leader, while you're assisting the child, should call 911 as soon as possible in that way. And you'll notice number 3 under that, it says significant injuries should be documented on the day they take place. So there's reports, there's little hangers on the classrooms if you've seen those. Inside there are some half-sheet papers that are injury or unusual incident reports. And so again, that's a matter it's good for the child and the family that it's noted, it's good for you, and it's good for us as a church. So things like, a child fell off something and bruised their head, and then I talked to the parent about it. Or if there was a significant injury that happened outside and you helped care for it, filling out that report and confirming with the parent is good, especially for children and families that are not regularly part of our church. So that if a question comes up or there's some interaction, we have some verification. Here's what happened, here's how we dealt with it in that way. And then under the incidents, letter C there, the live threat or active shooter, as it mentions here, it lays out very clearly. So step 1 is get out as safely as you can, or as soon as you can if it's safe to do that. Communicating, so calling emergency responders right away. And then if necessary, hiding in a safe place until the threat is over, closing the door, doing what you can to be safe in that way. And then finally, if it gets to this point, that a leader needs to fight as a last resort to try to deal with that. And so, again, another advantage we have because we have a smaller building is that it's easier to monitor and keep track of those things. But those are some steps that can be helpful if needed in that way. All right, the last point that I have, and this starts on page 14, and then I will go, Dustin. I'll give you time here. I'm 3 minutes over. Is reporting and a response plan for child neglect and abuse. Here's what I'll say, because I want to keep us on track here. Okay, the next 5 pages are part of this. We have many people in our building, right? In a given week, children and teens. And so part of our care that we can provide is to just be aware, to have an open eyes and have open ears. That's really the best thing you can do when it comes to caring. And so if you're seeing things that are concerning or troubling, that are suspicious of abuse or of neglect in this way, don't be silent and don't act as if nothing is the case. If you have a question, come and talk to a leader, and we can talk through it and we can work through the matter. And I'd say, if in doubt, if there is a serious suspicion of abuse and neglect in that way, if in doubt, just call in. Okay, it can be an anonymous call, and you can play a vital role again in caring for that child. And if you have questions on this, okay, rule follower, rule breaker, right? If you have questions on this or concerns, please talk to me. I've talked to several leaders, both in this ministry and in our former ministry, who they said, I saw this, I heard this, I'm not sure what to do. Like, please come and talk to me or talk to Pastor Kit. We would love to talk to you on this. But again, if you have reasonable suspicion, please do report that, because we do want to care for the child and for their family in that way.